Hey, welcome to Crossroads, folks. The cases against Donald Trump are not looking so good. Special counsel Jack Smith has now admitted that prosecutors misled the judge in the classified documents case and are now being accused of tampering with evidence, which is a crime, by the way. Now, this is sparking debates over whether the case could get thrown out and maybe more, and also on whether prosecutors themselves might have committed crimes in their attempts to go after Trump. Now, Epoch Times says this. They say prosecutors in a court filing said that in some of the boxes that FBI agents seized from President Trump's Florida resort, the order of papers has been changed since shortly after the seizure. They say prosecutors compared scans of the boxes done in 2022 under orders from Judge Cannon with the present state of the boxes and noticed that the order is not the same. Briefly on this. Now remember, the raid on Mar-a-Lago, that was the big case that kind of jump-started this whole attack on Trump. That was the one where it seemed like Donald Trump, was it, and he was going to jail. That was when prosecutors, you might remember, published that infamous photo of all the documents that Trump had it looked like he scattered around the floor of his home. Do you remember that? They took a picture of the floor of Mar-a-Lago, and there were all these classified documents on it, and they had pieces of paper on top saying classified. Well, it turns out that was a photo op. They had organized that themselves and then leaked it to the press, the prosecutors, which in and of itself might be problematic in most cases. We'll see how this one goes. But also, those papers they had placed on top, it turned out that those were placed there by the investigators themselves because they didn't want to show, I guess, the classified documents themselves, which makes sense. But that also means that they, of course, altered the crime scene and took photos of it. But even further than that, the documents inside that stack were not necessarily related to the piece of paper they had on top, suggesting they made a falsified photo op, is what they're being accused of. Now here's a quote from it. They say there are some boxes where the order of items within that box is not the same in the associated scans, Mr. Smith's team said. In a footnote, prosecutors acknowledged the update contrasts with what they told the judge less than 1 month ago during a hearing in the case, meaning again that they had said to the judge something different. They didn't seem to tell the judge the truth, in other words. And note that when Judge Cannon asked during the hearing whether the boxes were in their original intact form as seized, remember, as seized, a prosecutor on the team said, quote, they are, with one exception, and that is that the classified documents have been removed and placeholders have been put in the documents. Turns out not only did they put placeholders in place of the classified documents, they also may have jumbled the order, and we have to take their word that the placeholders actually represent the true contents. In other words, because they put placeholders in place that may not even reflect what's actually there, again, it's not clear whether, again, they messed with the crime scene and messed with the evidence. And as the prosecutors were unable to confirm why the order of paper was changed, but offered a theory. They don't know what happened, in other words, but they're saying theoretically maybe it was something. It notes as well that in another recent filing, President Trump's team said that the case should be dismissed because prosecutors are motivated by, they say, improper political animus. They don't like Trump, pointing in part to how White House lawyers worked with the National Archives and Records Administration on its referral to the Department of Justice, and how President Joe Biden has said that he was making sure President Trump does not become the next president again. Meaning, of course, there's evidence now that Biden himself was in communication with these individuals, expressed intent of why, again, this case might be moving forward to make sure that President Trump is not reelected as president. And they're suggesting based on that, there is a political motivation and maybe even animus, right? They don't like Trump. They don't want him to become president again. That has maybe influenced the integrity of this case. That's the claim, at least. Now, look, the case is being framed differently on each side. To be fair, right? The prosecutors are explaining it more as just an honest change to make it easier to handle the classified documents. That, these are classified documents. They can't just be like thrown in a court. They can't just be put in somewhere that's unsafe, because that's the entire alleged crime they're accusing Trump of committing, right? It's not like they're putting it in their garage next to their Corvette or something, right? So they have to make sure the documents are in a safe location, and they have to make sure that they're not just being read by anybody. Remember as well, that was one of the challenges that they said they were going to face with the jury. The judge was wondering whether the jury should be able to see the documents, because how are they going to judge whether a real crime took place or whether this was really as bad as it sounds unless they know what the documents actually were? And remember, prosecutors don't want that happening, and so they're trying to make sure that the documents are not falling into the wrong hands, so to speak, making sure that these, the dangerous nature of classified documents, if they get into the wrong hands, they're trying to make sure that situation doesn't happen on their side. Now, Trump and his team are explaining it as potentially criminal tampering with evidence, though. So the Trump team is saying that not only is this wrong, not only should this basically get the case thrown out, they're even suggesting that Special Counsel Jack Smith and his team, by the very act of messing with the crime scene, may have committed crimes themselves. And many others are pointing to that as well, that if you delete evidence or alter evidence during a prosecution, ironically, that's what they're accusing the Jan 6ers of. That's the Enron crime of what they call disrupting an official proceeding, potentially, right? We haven't seen criminal charges on this, but some are suggesting that the prosecutors themselves may have committed that crime. Now, here's some more details on what allegedly happened, according to Politico. Politico says that Smith's team, again, Special Counsel Jack Smith, revealed in the filing that FBI agents carried printed, classified cover sheets during the August 8, 2022 search of Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate and used them to replace any classified documents they discovered in cardboard banker's boxes that littered the former president's residence. They said, quote, "The investigative team used classified cover sheets for that purpose until the FBI ran out because there were so many classified documents. At which point, the team began using blank sheets with handwritten notes indicating the classification level of the documents seized," the prosecutors wrote. Later, they said the handwritten notes were replaced with more formal placeholder sheets. But some of the handwritten notes, and this is where it gets complicated, some of the handwritten notes may have been left in the boxes as well, suggesting that the investigators may have jumbled up their own notes with the actual evidence. And they note that that has complicated efforts to link a placeholder to a specific classified document, suggesting we don't even know whether the evidence holds up, frankly, because they may have replaced certain evidence with their own handwritten notes. And again, if you're being accused of a crime, and let's imagine that you get arrested by the police and they search your home, and you, for example, are accused of having falsified documents, right? Maybe let's not imagine it's like you're the president. You're accused of maybe falsifying deeds or something like that, right? The prosecutors replace the deeds with notes they have. They handwrote them themselves, and maybe you had like 5 of them, and they misplaced 1 or 2, and then all that's left is their handwritten note. If run before a jury and before a judge, and the original evidence is no longer there, or has been altered to the extent that you can no longer tell what was from the investigators and what was from you, to what degree do you feel the evidence may have kept or lost its integrity? That is the problem they're now facing with this case. The investigators, it seemed, may have acted a bit sloppily and jumbled up their own handwritten notes with the actual alleged evidence. And again, to the extent that they've even confused the order and maybe which documents go where. Now, Politico notes that in a post on his Trump social site, Truth Social Friday, They're not naming it on Politico. They say Trump painted the disclosures or they did earlier, right, at catastrophic for the government's case. And he said that Smith and his team committed blatant evidence tampering by mishandling the very boxes they used as a pretext to bring this fake case, Trump said, accusing prosecutors of, quote, deeply illegal actions that should trigger dismissal of all charges. Now look, one of the big issues, again, is the so-called photo op. Because not only is it an issue, for example, of them jumbling the evidence, and not only is it an issue of them, possibly even losing track of some documents or mixing in what is from the prosecutors versus what was actually there. And to the extent that you have to kind of take the prosecutor's word that, that their evidence actually represents what they found, this is basically on their shoulders now. It's hard to say whether that will hold up, frankly. But the other side of it is intent, because Trump is noting that they seem to have a political animus. They're being motivated politically. And the photo op, which, again, they took and then leaked to the press, which, of course, made Trump look irresponsible and may have even influenced a future jury selection, because you would imagine that most people in the country probably saw that photo. The prosecutors themselves, in their own alleged animus, may have damaged the fundamental integrity of the case. And in their haste to maybe take that photo, they seem to have not properly handled the documents they're accusing Trump of mishandling. Now, I'll be talking more about all this, though, after a quick word from our sponsor.
Experts agree. One of the best ways to protect against financial uncertainty is to diversify your portfolio. Learn how physical gold and silver can secure your retirement funds from today's economic challenges. With a gold IRA from American Hartford Gold, you can safeguard your wealth with no penalties or taxes when you transfer your current qualifying retirement accounts. Call now and our precious metals specialists will send you a free information kit, no cost or obligation. American Hartford Gold, a trusted industry leader with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau, has a 5-star rating from thousands of happy clients. Whether you are getting physical precious metals in a gold IRA or delivered to your doorstep, we offer only the highest quality gold and silver. For your peace of mind, we also offer a no-fee buyback commitment, a low-price guarantee, along with free shipping and free insurance. So don't wait. Call the number on your screen today and secure your financial future.
Hey, welcome back. Now, prosecutors in the classified documents case against Trump are being accused of posting misleading photos of the evidence. And one of the big issues is the so-called photo op, because, again, not only did they leak a photograph of the evidence to the press, which may have influenced a future jury and, of course, made Trump look irresponsible, but it turns out that they themselves framed that photo and they themselves organized it in such a way that looked bad, frankly. They even put classified cover sheets and did not properly tell the press or the public that, again, this was them, not Trump, basically. Charlie Kirk noted, this image was leaked to the media following the raid of Mar-a-Lago, the first time such a dramatic action was taken against a former president. But it turns out those classified cover sheets were paper clipped on top of documents by the FBI. In other words, again, he's making the point that those cover sheets were from the FBI and the documents in those stacks were from the FBI, meant to replace what was actually there. And he notes that it gets worse. In their haste to paint Trump as a criminal, the special counsel now concedes that some of the top secret cover sheets do not even match the relevant document. In other words, they created a photo op and it's not even accurate. He said they lied, they leaked, they smeared, just like with the Russia hoax, just like with the impeachment hoax, just like with every other case against Trump. What an absolute dumpster fire. And he's saying, investigate Jack Smith. Again, Charlie Kirk and Trump now suggesting that Jack Smith may have possibly committed crimes and maybe he should be the one investigated. Now, the other big issue is that the prosecutors seemed unsure whether each placeholder corresponds with the right documents, as I discussed. Now, the cross-reference of evidence is not matching up, and they've noted the discrepancy in this. This does create some serious issues with the evidence because, look, in some cases, if evidence is inaccurately submitted to a court, if you, for example, are involved in a legal case and either you don't submit evidence or you improperly submit the evidence, in most cases, it risks getting thrown out. A lot of times, the judge will not accept that evidence. I know of people who personally who've been involved in court cases where this has happened. A good friend of mine, for example, this actually happened to. She had a stalker, very terrible case. She went, of course, to court, didn't really have the money for a lawyer, didn't really know how to handle the case, and forgot to submit certain evidence and then improperly submitted some evidence. And even though she was involved in, really kind of dangerous levels of stalking, the judge would not accept it. And I know that sounds far out, but that's part of how our legal system works. So even in cases where you might sympathize with the individual, and the judge did express sympathy, in most cases, if you improperly submit evidence, the whole case can get thrown out. You can lose the whole thing. Again, as a journalist, I went to community college, nothing special, but we learned, of course, about evidence in court cases, as an investigative journalist. This is something you have to learn. That if, for example, during the investigation, if you maybe record somebody surreptitiously in a state that does not allow that, that evidence cannot be used in court. And if police act on the evidence from a journalist when the evidence has been collected through illegal means, the whole case can get thrown out. There are cases, for example, where very serious criminal charges came about. One case of such we were told about was a murder, and the journalists recorded the individual using a telescopic boom mic, or a telescopic microphone, and captured an individual admitting to murder during a phone call. The issue was the individual was on his own property and they did not have permission to record him. And so when prosecutors tried using that admission of guilt, the audio recording, as evidence, it turned out that that was illegally obtained and they were not able to submit it to court. That ended up getting the entire case thrown out. Now, in this case, where Jack Smith's team has now admitted that they, of course, jumbled evidence, in other words, they improperly submitted evidence, there is the possibility that the evidence itself could get thrown out. And if they cannot differentiate what maintains its integrity and what does not, and even then, how can the judge take them at their word of it, then how can they trust the evidence? Just illustrating how serious this is for the case. The evidence itself may have lost its integrity, right? Now, and again, if there were crimes committed as well during the submission process, that they had messed with the crime scene, so to speak, that they had improperly submitted evidence, or that, again, maybe they committed crimes in the obtaining of the evidence or submitting of it, that could be problematic for them also. Now, some have suggested as well that the judge in the case seems to be leaning more in favor of Trump as well. I've seen a lot of, for example, Democrat commentators noting that this is a pro-Trump judge, and they're suggesting that given the fact the judge seems to be more in favor of Trump, and again, it's in a state where that's more likely, in Florida, there is a chance the judge may be more sympathetic towards Trump's case than towards Jack Smith's. But again, take it for what you will, right? Now, regardless of whether it was intended or not, though, Republicans are not going to let this drop. Now, Fox News said this. They said House GOP Conference Chair Elise Stefanik, a Republican of New York, is filing an ethics complaint against special counsel Jack Smith on Tuesday, accusing Jack Smith, the special counsel, of violating Department of Justice standards and trying to tip the election against former President Trump. Because again, not only now is there evidence of improperly submitted evidence, altered evidence, and even the framing of improperly sorted evidence to create a photo op which they then leaked to the press. There's also no evidence of coordination with Biden and his administration with the intent of trying to prevent Trump from running for office again or becoming president again. Now, they note that in a letter sent to the DOJ's Office of Professional Responsibility, Stefanik urged the department watchdog to investigate Smith over accusations of, quote, abusing the resources of the federal government to unlawfully interfere with the 2024 presidential election. He notes that, quote, Jack Smith's multiple attempts to rush to trial the federal January 6 case against President Trump violated long-standing explicit Justice Department policy, Stefanik wrote, and he said that, quote, further, Jack Smith's repeated violations of the United States District Court for the District of Columbia's stay of proceedings are a lawless breach of trial ethics and lawyerly conduct. He notes that Jack Smith's actions brought disrepute to the Justice Department and the federal government as a whole and should face discipline appropriately. Again, he's talking more about the entire breadth of what Jack Smith is doing, not specifically just the Mar-a-Lago case. Now, of course, it's not just Republicans either that seem to be having issues with the cases. It seems now that this is becoming more of a bipartisan issue. There seems to be an agreement that the prosecutions against Trump are falling apart. This is HBO host Bill Maher, notably. And he's noting that not only is the classified documents case against Trump not looking good for prosecutors, but basically every other case is not looking so good, and maybe the only hope they still have is Stormy Daniels. I'll be talking about this, though, and also showing you how Maher also noted that his own interview with Stormy Daniels actually appears to contradict what she recently said during her testimony. That'll be only, though, on EpochTV.com. That's our uncensored platform that's not afraid to report the truth as it should be reported. So for those of you on YouTube, Facebook, X, Rumble, click on the link below and come join us on EpochTV.com. You'll not only get access to the rest of my show, but also to our hard-hitting special reports and our great documentaries. Speaking of which, I just released a documentary called Weapons of Mass Migration on what's really happening with the border crisis. It turns out it's not what you've been told. We show evidence, for example, both of the Grand Bargain Pact, where your tax dollars are being used to give cash handouts to illegal aliens, actual envelopes of money and prepaid debit cards. Your own tax dollars are being used for that. We also talk about other agreements that basically facilitate the mass movement of individuals into the United States, working hand in glove with the United Nations and various NGOs. Now, you can find the link to that documentary in the description below. I'll show you a quick trailer, though, before we jump over to EpochTV.com.
An unrelenting stream of immigration. Non-stop.
According to statistics, around 7.2 million illegal immigrants entered the United States under President Joe Biden alone. They have United Nations facilities here, and the people pushing this are leading people to their deaths.
To what extent is the United Nations facilitating the border crisis?
They're throwing rocks!
They're being overridden by international powers.
We are not authorized to talk.
It is a humanitarian business now.
And they said, oh yeah, these are the debit cards. We're giving these debit cards to the immigrants.
Why all the cloak and dagger? Why are we being so stealthy about this?
Some of these people have gone on record and publicly talked about this. People close to Barack Obama.
It puts 12 million people on the path to citizenship and eventually voters.
I've been researching, of course, what's happening, but I want to know why it's happening.
We'll see chaos on a global scale until America is extinguished and the power shifts completely to the east.